we have done it.
We've done it. I'm just gonna test my levels real quick,
boys.
Testing. Okay, we're good.
Yep,
that sounds really nice.
Good to go.
Max, how was your day?
Totally. Yeah, my day's been pretty good actually. I went out and I woke up. The power was out.
Ooh,
so
why?
That was a little interesting. Windstorms,
Oh,
a whole bunch of branches.
How many
tons
knots?
of power outages everywhere. I don't know, actually. I did not pay attention to it whatsoever. Mine is waking up with a whole bunch of stuff I needed to do this morning, realizing the power was out and it's going like, oh shit. And then having to hoof it to a coffee shop and use their Wi-Fi and stuff.
Isn't that a blessing though? In the 21st century, we can just go wherever we want and do work.
Yeah. I mean, being an avid lover of coffee and also productivity, which I don't necessarily always get at my house, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, now you're not on Kratom anymore, so coffe's going to be the next substitute, right?
Yeah, exactly. Man, I mean,
how's that going?
It's going pretty good, actually. I've just dialed back everything because my ankles were hurting a lot and I wasn't really feeling great. And I've been pretty depressed lately and stuff. So I've just kind of dialed everything back, just been trying to give my body as much rest as possible. I feel like I was a little off for the first couple days, but I have no idea if that was because of an absence of kratom or just way more pain or, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of different things happening all at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, kratom's pretty awesome.
It is pretty awesome. I mean, like I had said before, I definitely feel that there is a hangover almost with the kratom when you don't take it and then you get back on it again, or you don't take it at all.
Yeah, it's definitely a drug. There is a reason beyond taste of why that is not mainstream like coffee,
Yeah, for sure.
I'm pretty sure like the 10-year use of kratom has some pretty bad effects.
It's definitely not been studied, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I'll be the test case.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're guinea pigs. It's perfect.
Welcome to the Climbing Majority Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Kyle Brocksterman. In today's episode, Max and I are going to be talking with my lifelong friend and climbing partner, Joree Weatherly. We start an open discussion about the first year of trad climbing. We share the stories, lessons, and close calls that we experienced during this time and talk about the ways to avoid making these mistakes again. So welcome to the podcast, everybody. Sitting here next to me is Joree Weatherly.
What's up, man?
He's a lifelong friend of mine. We met in high school and just kind of have been friends ever since. We've been through a lot of similar life experiences, and we definitely started climbing around the same time. And we both dove into this first year of trad climbing together. So it's awesome to have him on the show. Welcome, Joree.
So thank you for having me on this podcast. I'm very excited to chat with you both today. This is a really cool project that you've started, and I'm just psyched to help you out with it.
Cool. Yeah, you're definitely our first guest. This is episode recording 4, so first guest.
Have you broken both your ankles too, Joree?
I am not part of that distinct club, but
right.
It's been quite something very interesting to witness.
Throughout our lives, he definitely learns from my mistakes.
Definitely.
That's a good way. Yeah.
I've always kind of been an observer and seen, some of Kyle's moves. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, noted. Don't do that.
Yeah. Someone's got to be the trailblazer and someone's got to be the smart one,
Exactly.
Cool. So Joree, where were you 4 hours ago?
I just flew in from Las Vegas. I was there for business. I am a partner at a drone company. And
oh, sweet.
Yeah, we were out there demoing our technology for a private jet company. And what they do is they specialize in transporting a lot of like Hollywood clientele, sports teams, people like that. So what we do is our technology is, I'm sure you've seen the planes towing banners at the beach before.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what we do is we use drones to accomplish that same task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah. And so we're patent pending on the concept of the entire industry. And we're currently in market with basically it's a banner that's hung underneath a Matrice 600 Pro, which is one of DJI's enterprise kind of solutions that they offer. However, moving forward, we're switching over to a fully digital platform. So imagine a flying jumbotron, if you will. And the really cool thing about the digital is we're implementing an artificial intelligence algorithm that can actually read the crowd as we're flying and spit out marketing metrics. So crowd size, age, gender demographics, even engagement score. So how long people are looking at ads, what part of the ads they're engaging with, and delivering all of that to our partners.
So pretty much Skynet.
Essentially, yeah. We're creating Skynet, but we're good guys, so it's not going to go bad.
Skynet for advertising. So what could go wrong?
Right.
No, that's actually that's fascinating, really cool, and obviously like so in line with 21st century and what we're living. I mean, even from drone footage is now like so easy and accessible and popular. Or I think in Canada actually they just delivered from hospital to hospital a pair of lungs, I think, via a drone, right, for organ transplant. Super cool stuff happening, right? It's like I think of myself growing up, and I don't know how old I was, maybe like 9 or 10 or something, and we got this TV that was like this big and like this wide, and I remember watching Jaws on it with my dad and just like blown away. And then like Game Boys came out, and that was like this revolutionary, like, oh my god. And now it's like we're walking around with like supercomputers and drones are advertising and AI exists. It's just like it's almost a completely different world. It's crazy.
Yeah, and we're young enough to see the next change, which is going to be a whole nother fucking set of mind blowing.
Totally. We're going to be like 70 in the Matrix wondering what the fuck's going on.
There's going to be like half bionic people walking around.
Totally.
Nice. That's pretty cool. Definitely one of those sectors of drone technology that I think has not been tapped into yet. And it's cool to see you guys at the spearhead of this movement. It'll be exciting to see where it goes. If you guys want to check out Promo Drone, check them out on their Instagram. I believe it's promo.drone. Nice. Yeah, promo.drone. Check them out. But bringing this back to climbing, like I said, Joree and I met back in high school, and I started climbing when I was about 25. And Joree and I inherently started climbing together at that time. Joree, just give me a little quick explanation about how you were introduced to climbing and what that initial experience was like. You know, did you start at a gym? Did you start outside? How quickly did you move outside? Just give me a little background on that initial experience.
Well, I initially started off climbing in a gym when I was a kid. Well, actually, I can kind of roll it back. My very first experience climbing was when I must have been about 8 years old. And my dad took me up to Mount Laguna, which is a mountain that's in East County, San Diego, which is where I'm from. And we decided to go up this route, and it was maybe a 50-foot kind of slabby looking thing. And at the time, I didn't have ropes or climbing shoes or anything like that. I hadn't tapped into the community at all. And so I was like, I'm just going to go up this thing. This looks fun. That was just kind of always inherently a part of who I was. And so I started climbing up this thing, and I get about halfway up, and then I did a move that I couldn't reverse if I had to try. And I found myself in a position where I was stuck. I couldn't go up. It was a little sketchy, and I couldn't go down. So I called down to my dad, and he was like, "What's going on?" I told him I was stuck. And so he hiked up this gully and went around the top of the climb and ended up climbing down to where I was. And I had to basically dyno to jump to my dad and grab his hand and pull me out of this super sketchy situation. So since then, it's gotten a lot safer, fortunately. But early on climbing memory. And so aside from that, I had the typical birthdays as a kid where we'd go to the climbing gym. There's a place in San Diego called Solid Rock Gym, and a couple of my buddies had birthdays there throughout the years, but I really didn't get into it until I was in my younger 20s with Kyle. And we initially started really getting into it at a bouldering gym called Vital. It's in Carlsbad. And I mean, we would just spend hours there. Kyle had a membership, and I remember they used to have 24-hour access to this gym. They would just give their members a key code and you could go in. And so
it was super legit.
Yeah.
That's very American. In Canada, with so little 24-hour things, I can't tell you how badly I wish there was a 24-hour climbing gym here.
It was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
It was nice having access to that. And that's really where I dove into it was at Vital. And relatively quickly, within the first 6 months or so of starting to climb there, we started venturing into the outdoors. And another thing that was kind of a really big driving force for us, or at least for me, was actually listening to the Enormocast. So it's kind of cool that a podcast was ultimately what really ended up getting me extremely psyched about climbing, and now I'm chatting on one about climbing.
That's actually pretty cool. Yeah, I can definitely relate.
Cool.
We both jumped into listening to the Enormocast that's hosted by Chris Clues. Have you heard of it?
I haven't. No. Yeah.
Definitely check it out. Super cool conversations with some really cool people, and he has just a really laid back vibe. Really funny. Interviews some really cool people, and has some really cool topics that he covers. So I definitely recommend checking out. All our listeners here, check out the Enormocast by Chris Clues. Definitely a really good listen.
Yeah, definitely gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, there's some classic interviews that he does. Some really good quality. There's laughs. There's tears. There's a little bit of everything in it.
Yeah, one that immediately strikes my memory here now that we're talking about this, especially with Max, you and I, our injuries. There was a gentleman who came on the show who had 100-foot fall. He went up to the top of an anchor and thought he was on belay and just let go of the wall. And the belayer had taken him off belay because they lacked communication, and he fell and landed. He penciled into the ground from 100 feet.
Yeah. Wow. God. And did he survive?
Yeah, he survived. He had really traumatic leg problems afterward. I'm pretty sure he had his leg amputated, or at least down from the knee, after like a year of complications.
Wow.
Yeah, but he said he basically, his knees and his hips just exploded on impact, and he was just lucky to be alive, but also entered an entire nightmare of a life for years.
Yeah, for sure. That's just like an unbelievably traumatic injury. And I hear things like that, and I just think of the absolute impossibility of surviving that. But then like my brain tries to rationalize it and go like, okay, but like how many other people had a fall that severe and just did not survive? And I'm going to guess there's like way more people who just don't survive than, you have these outliers that you hear about, and you're just like, it's just total disbelief about. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, like we had spoken in the last podcast, every 10 feet is 10%. So at 100 feet, you are supposed to die. But yeah, so bringing it back to Joree's story here, he's basically outside now. He's been climbing in the gym from Vital. I think we spent some time at Mesa Rim down in San Diego as well. That for me, that was really what stoked the fire, was seeing these tall walls and actually being able to practice lead climbing. And we just bought a rack and went outside and started sending it. And that really kind of brings us to our topic today, is the experiences we find in the first year of trad climbing. We want to bring light to the mistakes, share the stories, and hopefully resonate with a lot of you here in the audience. And hopefully we share some stories to either prevent something or provide a laugh, because the first year of trad climbing is a bit tumultuous. How do you say that?
Tumultuous?
Tumultuous?
Yeah.
I'm not advanced to say that word. It's a sketchy time. It's a sketchy time for all of us. So yeah, Max, let's start with you. Let's hear a story, first year trad climbing. What stands out? What kind of story stands out for you?
Yeah, first year trad climbing, I don't think I have like any crazy horror stories or anything like that. More so just like I've told you before about the first time I trad climbed. So a mentor of mine took me out. It was in the Smoke Bluffs in Squamish. So beautiful place. You're in, downtown Squamish. You can see the Chief and all three of its peaks. And then the Smoke Bluffs are right there. So to anybody who hasn't been to Squamish, we're talking like tons and tons of different crags, beautiful scenery, really amazing granite, and more climbing than you could ever do in a lifetime kind of place. And it's like right off the highway. So pretty amazing place. And we parked at this more so back location, and probably 5 minutes in, not even, there's a really easy 5.6, 5.7, 5.8, and then I think there was a 5.9. And I had a really good day, actually, taken out and shown placements and going over that, and followed Terry, my mentor at the time. And we really went over a lot of placements and a lot of stuff, and I felt pretty confident. But, within like 3 hours, I was just ready to be like, I was just like so psyched on it. I was like, oh man, like I'm totally ready to like take a lead and, try this 5.7 that I already climbed a couple times and stuff. And fortunately for me that day, everything just totally fine. I feel like I'd been mentored really well. And, it was a really positive experience. But I think looking back on it, just Stoke is really great, and it's really amazing. And that eagerness, like we all want that, and we definitely want to like promote that because people want to get excited about their sport. But I think looking back on it in hindsight, it just would have been probably more practical and better for me to just do a whole bunch more mock leads, to just take it slow, to maybe like bounce test gear, just have a little bit more in that repertoire and not rely as much on just, okay, I have this rudimentary understanding of a camming device, and, like you clearly don't understand the nuance of like connection through the rock. Fortunately, like if you put a cam that's reasonably placed deep in like Squamish granite, like, I don't know, it's not a bolt, but like it's pretty close, like it's some really good rock quality for sure. But yeah, I just think just slowing down, having a more structured approach rather than just, being unbelievably stoked and just sending and being psyched, because I do think that is a really great mentality. And I'm sure we all have examples of people we know or professional climbers that operate like that and have had so much success. But I do definitely just question how many people are out there not having success or having accidents or mistakes are happening because things are going too fast. And it's so easy to look at those outliers in media or outliers that we know who are so successful and just stoked and just, everything works out great for them. And that's amazing, and nothing to take away from people who are like that and who can do that. But I think for the majority of people, it's probably smarter to have a structured approach, to take things a little slower. And, over a series of a couple days or whatever, do a whole bunch of mock leads, really test your place and try and understand the nuance of putting it in the rock and the rock type and the median you're using. So I think that would be my thing. Not really a horror story or anything like that, or too funny, unfortunately. I wish it could be pretty comical, but I think the lesson and the takeaway from that for me is just slow things down, have a more structured approach. Yeah.
You bring up multiple good points. The first one, I think, is your point about a mentorship. I think that it's funny, back in the day, that was the only way to get into trad climbing at all, was having a mentor. And maybe it's just three of us, but I wonder how many people these days who do get into trad climbing get into it because of a mentor. I wonder how much of that core value of the sport itself, when it comes to having a mentor, still plays a role these days. It seems so far, I'm speaking for myself and Max, I think Joree, the same, we all had a mentor of sorts that passed along this like ancient information, that's passed down. You don't go to a class, take trad climbing, they don't teach trad climbing in the gyms. And maybe that's a fault and maybe that's a good thing. We don't really know yet. It is kind of cool to have it as this magical information that's passed down word of mouth from friend to friend.
Yeah, I think something I would also interject there, try and be the best judge of character you can, because ultimately at the end of the day, like, it's safety and it's your life on the line, and trad climbing is inherently dangerous. It can also be very, very safe if you're, not taking risks and what you're doing very well. So there's a difference between like just a mentor or like somebody who is good at being a mentor, if that makes sense. So like for me, I was incredibly fortunate to meet this gentleman, Terry Louie, through work. He was very, very calm, great at conveying information, really, really safety oriented, so that's just something you definitely also, I think, want to look for in something somebody who's teaching you, is to just, to just be very safety oriented. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was, for both of us, I think the same person who kind of taught us was our friend Robert. And a lot of our first big adventures were with him. As a matter of fact, my first trad climbing experience was climbing Traderhorn at Talkeets. And that was my first climb that was, any kind of real exposure. It was really fun. About 300 feet off the deck, you step onto this horn and it's just straight air underneath you. And I remember experiencing that for the first time and my mind just melted. It was incredible. I was in.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get enough after that. We went back to Talkeets almost every weekend after that first climb, and just had a blast and just started firing off routes up there.
Yeah, the funny thing is, it seems, Max, like you had a mentor that you worked with for how long? How many sessions did you have with this gentleman?
Before, like, until I went trad climbing, or
how many times did you climb or gain knowledge from this guy before you kind of like flew off the tree and didn't climb with him anymore and you just started leading your own stuff?
Yeah, him and I had climbed for the better part of probably about a year together, I would say. So yeah, and I've told you before, Kyle, like my first experience climbing outdoors ever was ice climbing with him. So that was like pretty interesting. So
yeah, it's quite an introduction.
Yeah, for sure. Like I had a pretty big go-getter attitude towards trad, but I'd also like dealt with like a lot of exposure, a lot of gear, a lot of safety talks, a lot of overhead hazard. I've been doing huge amounts of research and reading. So it was pretty, it felt pretty spirited, but like there was also some really good structure to it. And like Terry was a really good teacher. The first part of the day, we just went over to cracks and just focused on, placing a gazillion cams a million different ways and talking about direction of pull and everything and cranking and testing them and, going through that whole aspect and everything. And then doing a whole bunch of mock leads and stuff. So,
yeah, I'm like comparing your mentorship to mine. I had one gentleman take me out for half a day and showed me how to build an anchor and showed me how to like put gear in basically. And then the only other mentorship experience I had was with Robert that day when we did our first multi-pitch together, and he led the first pitch and I led the second. And after that, I kind of turned into a mentor myself to the people around me. I kind of became a mentor for Robert. I, took the knowledge he gave me and the knowledge my friend gave me and quickly just started applying it to all these new routes that, Robert, he had been playing safe for quite some time with the grades and I was ready to push it. And I kind of started dragging everybody around me up these climbs. I was like, who wants to come with me? And it's definitely, I didn't have a lot of mentorship experience in my life, which I think, I'm lucky to be here right now after 6 years of climbing. But I think I had a lot of close calls because of my lack of mentorship. And, it was fun and exciting to be at the sharp end and to be the new mentor. But in retrospect, I think that I could have spent a lot more time learning the gear, learning the sport before just assuming that I knew what I was doing. And I think this brings myself to another point that you made. Once you learn the basics of the trad, the physics of trad placements, I think that it's easy to immediately start relying on your own physical capability of climbing to keep you safe rather than, putting the emphasis of your safety on the gear. And, you don't really test the safety of your gear until you fall. And so if you don't fall, you're safe. And I think that I personally definitely leaned into that particular form of safety a lot more than I did with actually just learning how to place the gear correctly. I just climbed without falling for quite a long time. And I think I personally got lucky the times I did fall. A lot of the placements I didn't really put enough thought into, they just worked. And that also kind of built up a little false sense of security as well.
Yeah. camming devices are definitely not bolts, and they are subject to human error and only as good as the median that you put them in, right? So a lot of variability there for sure.
Mm-hmm. So kind of in the vein of early on mistakes due to lack of knowledge, it reminds me of one of my and Kyle's first attempts at creating a new route. There was an area near where we both lived that we had kind of been scoping out. We looked up this mountainside. There was no trail or anything like that to get to it.
We were super inspired by the normal cast. And we're like, let's be first accessionists. Let's find some new routes. We're badass. And yeah, we scoped out this cliff and we're just ready to project some new routes.
And so we get up there and it's untouched rock, right? So it's grainy and loose, talus. And so we hike up to the top of it and we decide we're going to wrap it down and then climb up just to kind of set up a top rope sort of a situation. And mind you, this is very early on. I'd like to.
What would you say? This is like the first few months, I would say.
This is like one of our first outdoor climbs, period.
It was very early on.
Yeah. So we go up to the top of this formation, and to build the anchor, we actually wrapped a rock using cordelette, and that worked just fine. And when we went to set up the rappel,
we were setting up like a top belay,
right?
So that Joree could be at the top assisting the braking and would lower me off the edge and then pull in slack as I climbed back up the face.
Gotcha.
And so as we set it up, Kyle wraps off and starts going down and scoping out the route. And I'm sitting at the top of this formation and I'm just staring at my ATC and looking at it, and it looks funny. And I start to realize that the entire system is weighted on the wire of the ATC, not through the actual ATC itself. That yes, the rope was going through that, but the entire weight of the system was being weighted on the actual wire.
Basically, the carabiner kept the rope attached to the ATC, but the cordelette that we had as an anchor was attached to the wire, and the entire force of both him and I's body weight were on that wire that has absolutely no strength rating.
Yeah.
Kyle actually reached out to Black Diamond, and they don't even have a weight rating for this because it's not something they test.
I was kind of being a dick about it. I was like, you've got to have some sort of test, You've made a safety equipment. Yes, it's not rated for strength, but someone has got to have tested it, And no one would give me an answer. No, and I got it. It's probably some sort of liability issue, but no one would give me a straight answer. But yeah, it was bad news. So yeah, lesson there. Don't be a Joree.
And so the thing is when I realized this, I called down to Kyle and I said, "Hey, Kyle, are you in a place where you can, hang out for a second? Do you have good footing? Do you have good hands?" He's like, "Yeah, why? What's up?" It's like,
just get up.
Just get back up here. Yeah. And he climbed back up, and fortunately nothing happened, but we certainly never made that mistake again.
Yeah, and it's like, seems like a really stupid mistake, and it absolutely was. But it just goes to show how much attention to detail climbing requires. And especially in the beginning stages, there's so much to focus on. There's like, how do I tie this knot? What do I clip into? Now we've been climbing for 6 years. Everything is so second nature. I can do it with my hands closed or my eyes closed. But, back then you can easily overlook something. And, with the overstoke and everything, it's just really easy to overlook something. And something that's scary like that, because the wire can hold something. And so there's no immediate sign that something's wrong except for visually actually seeing what's wrong. And so we had this mistrust in the system because it did held weight in the first place. But yeah, thank God Joree was able to notice something wrong and we were able to remedy the situation. But yeah, lesson there, just pay attention, take it slow, and yeah, do your homework. Make sure everything's safe, because your life is on the line.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's so easy to have these mistakes, and I've recently been reading a slew of autobiographies by like famous climbers, and if you really pay attention to them, all of them have these like ridiculous horror stories in the beginning of their lives. You know what I mean? So they're just fortunate enough that like something didn't go wrong, or X thing didn't happen. So definitely not the only ones experiencing that.
Yeah, and that brings up a scary point. How many people don't survive these mistakes?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that
totally.
We hear about these crazy deaths, recently in Eldo and other places around California. But how many deaths just go undocumented? Based off silly mistakes just like this. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that just go unnoticed, which is really sad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think driving the conversation as well too, like opening the conversation like we are, it's, I think, something that maybe it's just how I feel personally, but it's so easy to pass judgment. But like what we really need to be doing, or what people need to be doing, is having really constructive conversations with people, because this is literally people's safety and people's lives. So rather than just, like trolling on the internet or just laying into somebody, like offer them some guidance, give them some information, talk to them, maybe even ask them their opinion of the situation. Like you see a weird picture and it's so easy to like judge, oh, you've got a 1 cam anchor there, but like they're standing on a 30-foot ledge. It just doesn't paint a proper picture, right? So I think having like a constructive conversation about safety and not being so quick to judging, or even if you are going to judge, offer something constructive from it, because if you just judge that person, and I don't mean you guys personally, like, anybody listening, if you're just judging somebody, but you're not offering them like constructive knowledge to change the behavior that they're doing, that is dangerous, that's really poor in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this is a topic that I think a lot of podcasts have talked about and that I've heard before, is just climbing etiquette at the crag. If you see someone doing something sketchy, it's definitely, if you see something that is genuinely unsafe and the person is at risk of either dying or severely injuring themselves, it's your duty to say something. And there's definitely two ways to handle it. You could be an asshole and you can come up to them and try to make them feel a little and stupid. Or you can come to them. I like to kind of think of it as a guide. Think of yourself as a professional. Maybe you're not a professional climber, but compared to this person who is clearly doing this wrong, you can act as a professional. And so you can approach them in that way and offer to educate and offer the safer way forward. Because unfortunately, a lot of people might be bitter about these people even being at the crags in the first place. Like, well, they don't belong here, But this whole podcast is about the new climbing majority, and there's going to be the light and the dark of that group. And unfortunately, the dark is going to be just like Joree and I. Luckily, we were alone that day and we didn't affect anybody else. But people just get psyched on climbing. It's super addictive and it's super rewarding. And so people are going to jump into it without thinking too much. And it's our job at the Crag to educate these people and to bring positivity to the sport and not try to ostracize people or to, the worst case scenario is to let people get injured, but I don't think people are really going to do that. They might just be dicks about
it. Yeah, really well said, Kyle. Yeah, totally agree. I think I do actually have a good, funny first time climbing story, I guess, actually. You guys, I can share one here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, okay, does ice climbing still counts, right? Because like that was the
main
way. So
only because you're Canadian, though.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I appreciate it. So Terry and I, again, we went and climbed to this place called Brandywine Falls, and off to if you're facing the falls on the left side, there's like a thing of ice that kind of rarely forms called sour grapes. And so, we had this whole funny experience actually, like trying to go find it, because there's like this huge kind of dome. It's like this massive like gully that goes in, and there's a waterfall on one side, and it's unbelievably beautiful, especially in winter, right? And so we go over to where we think this climb is that we saw from the lookout point, and it's kind of like almost a Cornish snow edge, and then larger trees further back, and so we realize like you can't actually look over the edge properly, and like the climb is vertical, right? So like you can't see it. So one of us has to walk like all the way back in deep snow to the lookout, and then start like yelling across this like 300-foot gully of like, no, like left, like right, like, trying to like hone the person into where it was. And we eventually got it. And then what we did is we have this 11 mil static cable that we sell at the company we were both working at, Mountain Equipment Co-op. And so this stuff's rated to like 40 kilonewtons. It's like, used in like shipping and stuff. So we got a whole bunch of that, and we just tied 2 figure-8s to 2 different trees and then extended it with a big master point. And so you have to do this really big extended rappel, right, to get back from the trees for this anchor. And so this was kind of like, totally out of my element here. I had a bag filled with like, all this like my food and thermos and all these things. And it was my first ever experience kind of with this. And so we had to rappel out on one of the strands of the extended anchor. And so Terry had gone first. Like, I'd done rappelling with him and stuff like this, but this was a little bit more complex than what I was used to. And so by the time I actually get over the edge and you're fully weighted on this system, and then I realized I have to now switch the master point, like I have to switch, my ATC to the master point, right, where the rope is, because I've been rappelling off of this like large strand of extended anchor. And so I'm hanging like in midair. There's like, like a 200-foot drop below me. It's like ice. I've got this heavy pack on. So I'm essentially effectively like in a crunch position, like trying to think like, how am I going to solve this problem and work through this? And it was just like this total debacle. And I remember I ended up having I had like a 21 centimeter ice screw, and I put that in, and it was really, really good. And then I clipped I think a draw to that, and then tried to unweight my ACC and all this like total nonsense. Which like, fortunately, I eventually ended up like switching onto the rope and stuff. And I didn't really feel like there was ever a period of like, catastrophic failure, like I could have died or something, but it was definitely like a really, really intense scenario and situation. And like, had I just been more proficient with like, fixing like personal anchor systems or using like any type of friction hips, like a Prusik or anything like that, that situation would have just gone like so much quicker and been so much safer. And so I think like kind of just the moral of this story is, like, thoroughly vet out what you're about to do before just going for it. And B would be like, any type of thing that you can do to secure yourself, to take in slack, to use like, friction hitches, like those are really important skills that can easily be overlooked. And they're not just useful for a backup for rappelling, right? Like, you're rappelling and the rope gets caught or something happens, you have to go up the rope, or you have to like, haul a buddy up, or whatever, X things that can happen in the climbing world. Those are really, really useful skills to have. And you should probably get pretty proficient in those if you're going to be going and climbing bigger walls or going to the alpine or ice climbing for sure. And
moreover, know how to do it before you're hanging off a ledge and having to figure it out.
100%. Yeah. Well, your partner, like your mentor's down there, like yelling at you, like,
yeah, it brings up an interesting point. It's really easy, to just focus on the abilities that take you up when nothing goes wrong. And you can rely on that most of the time. I've personally relied on that for 6 years, and I've never had to use any sort of rescue techniques, but it only takes once. And if you are finding yourself in a situation where you need to be able to use these techniques and you don't have them, it's going to be a really bad situation. So yeah, like you said, definitely take the time to learn these extracurricular forms of climbing. I think a lot of them are built around rescue techniques. And I think that having those skills to not only rescue yourself, but to rescue someone else that might be injured on the climb should be taught to everyone. It should be just a staple of climbing in general. And that's definitely something I personally need to explore a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's Ed Viesters. I'm pretty sure. So to any historians out there, maybe it was Reinhold Messner, but he says going up is optional, getting down is mandatory, right? Like a kind of classic quote. And like you were saying, Kyle, we focus so much on getting psyched and getting fit and climbing up. But getting back down is actually the more important skill if you really think about it, And it's so funny how much personally, so I feel that people spend way, way more time on being proficient and just climbing hard and going up. And really a skill that you should be very, very focused on as well too is, how do I extricate? How do I build trad anchors? How do I like wrap? What are like, good areas? What's a horn? Like what, X a million things that you should be knowing about either like rescue or, getting yourself out of there. So definitely, I think a takeaway would be that.
Yeah, this whole experience just brings me the story of Black Orpheus in Red Rock Canyon. It was it was Robert, you and I again.
Yep.
And it was the biggest climb that we had ever done to this point. I think it was 1,500 feet or 2,000.
The climb started 400 feet off the deck, and it was a 1,600 foot climb.
Okay, yeah. So 1,600 feet, and that was 600 feet more than anything we had done before, which was 1,000 feet, which was Tuckeats. And yeah, so we just fire up this thing. We start super late in the day. I think we started climbing at like noon or something.
Well, the day before, we had literally overnight drove in to Las Vegas, and we were pretty beat. We got a short day of climbing in and then camped, and then woke up the next day after having slept in after no sleep the night before. And we rock up to the parking lot, and we were all set. We had a 2,000 foot climb that we were looking to do. I'm totally blanking on what that was at this point. And we're getting racked up, and we're chatting with another climbing group that was in the parking lot. And they're like, "Oh, what are you hopping on today?" And we tell them, and they're like, "Oh, you're turned around, hun. You're not in the right area for that climb." And we were like, "Okay, so what area are we in?" And they directed us to where we were. And so we flipped to our guidebook and just picked out the climb that was the tallest in that area because, why not?
Yeah, of course.
Naturally. And so we ended up selecting Black Orpheus, and we left the truck at around, it must have been 11 a.m.
Yeah, it was like 10 or 11. The approach took us like an hour and a half.
Yeah. And so we're cruising up this thing. We're cruising up, making good time. It was a great climb. Absolutely gorgeous.
It actually ended up being one of the routes for the AMGA rock certification course.
Really?
They actually take you up. You have to climb that and like prove your proficiency on that climb. Anyways, yeah, we I finished the last pitch of this climb in the dark. I'm like slab climbing with a headlamp on, and we get to the top, and there's two descent options. There's one that goes down the gully system, which is a little more direct, and then there's another one that involves two rappels that have bolted anchors, and you have to find the anchors and rappel down, and then the rest of it is a walk. We decided that we didn't want to have to like look and get lost looking for these specific bolt anchors in the dark. And so we chose to just go with the gully because we at the time thought that it was going to be straightforward. You're in a gully, you go down the gully, you can't really get lost. You just keep going down. It was the wrong decision.
Well, and a side note here, we had a really old and outdated guidebook.
That's right. It was like black and white and made in the 70s.
So it was devoid of detailed information for sure. So we start going down this gully, and we make it down about 400 feet. We had two 70-meter ropes that we were tying together. So we're making these long 70-meter rappels. So we were making good time. And we do one rappel, and we go to pull the rope like we had done a couple times already, and it's stuck. And so we keep trying to yank it. And it wouldn't budge. And the way we were tying these ropes together was using an overhanded figure eight, basically to put them together. And so what had happened is the figure eight had gotten stuck in this crack. And so we start soloing back up to try and get as high up on this route as we can. And mind you, it's in a gully, so it's not too crazy, right? And we managed to get up as high as we can till we get to a section that was basically dead vertical, and we couldn't get any higher. And Kyle tries to climb up an additional maybe 10 feet or so above where it starts going vertical. And fortunately, one of us had a knife. It was Robert. So side note, all of you climbers that are doing big trad climbs in the mountains, always climb with a knife because it will save your life. And it did in this instance. So we had to cut the rope, which was particularly painful for me. I had a brand new rope. This was my first climb with it, and it just hurt.
His was the rope that was the one that had to get cut. We cut like 2/3 of it.
No, it wasn't 2/3. It was a 70-meter rope, and there's still more than half left.
Okay. You cut 1/3 out of it. Yeah, I mean, lesson learned there. I think that there was a lot of things we could have done. If we had brought an étrier and an ascender, we could have climbed back up the rope and figured out where it was stuck and, loosened it and actually have not had to cut the ropes. So I think another lesson there is to bring an ascender. And if you don't want to bring an ascender with an étrier, learn how to climb on a prusik, and you probably need 2 prusiks so you can climb up the rope. But my experience using a prusik to climb up the rope is not very fun. I'd rather just throw the ascender and an étrier in the bottom of my bag. But yeah, after that, we got down, and the last rappel, I think we had inches enough rope. If it had been any shorter, we would have been extra screwed.
Finally made it back to the car right around 2 a.m. So car to car, it was just north of 14 hours. Definitely a bigger mission. And we were very happy to get back to the car. We ended up going into town, and we got, I think it was like steak or something. It was a very large meal.
Luckily, we're in Vegas, and so there's 24-hour restaurants everywhere.
Right.
It's pretty fortunate.
Yes.
There's always McDonald's too, though, to be honest. I mean,
there's never McDonald's
at McDonald's after some climbs.
The worst story I have about that, my buddy and I, Josh, we did the Grand Teton car to car in 22 hours, and we didn't bring any food or beer in the cooler. We just there was nothing left in the car when we got back. And I mean, lesson right there for everyone. If you're going on a mission, focus on the food that you bring on the trip, but don't forget to load a cooler with treasure so that when you get back, you have treasure to enjoy yourself with, because that was the worst thing ever, was coming back to a car with nothing in it. And we really screwed ourselves because, we were like an hour outside of town. And so we're like dying of hunger and just so miserable after a 22-hour mission. And we get back to the town. We were, the whole time we were on the mountain, we were fantasizing. We're like, oh, we're going to get an old fashioned. We're going to get some steaks. It's going to be the best meal ever. And we get to town and everything's closed. And so we end up just shamefully eating like microwave burritos at a gas station and going to bed. Oh, man.
Yeah, the post-send goodies are key. You got to have them.
I'm pretty sure, though, after 22 hours, microwave burritos is a delicacy.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's practically a Michelin star right there.
Exactly.
Hey, man, I hyped myself up for a steak dinner. I was let down.
Yeah, I'm sure you were let down, but I bet you had a pretty good breakfast the next day.
I did. Yeah, it was good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the last story I can think of, based on this topic, was our climb up the Swallow. We go back to Tahquitz. We're trying to find another climb, and we picked this route called Swallow Direct, and it's got this infamous squeeze chimney, and we're like, fuck it, let's do it. And, to make this a short story, we solo up the first 100, maybe 150 feet of slab, just because, I don't know, at the time I was just like, it's easy. Let's solo it and we'll save the pitches, it'll be faster. And so we get to this spot, and instead of building an anchor, I just throw a number 2 in, and I'm like, all right, cool. Like, just belay me off this. And then I climb up like another 15 feet and put a number 1 in. And then I continue climbing. I end up falling. I fell, like probably 10, 15 feet from the number 1, and just go sliding down this slab. And, we're basically simuling at this point. Joree is just clipped to a single cam with a clove hitch. And there's another cam about 15 feet above that, which arrested the fall. But, just another really dumb mistake. If you do solo up and you're 100 feet above the ground, and even if it is low angle slab, put an anchor in. Just be safe. Follow the rules. There's no reason to skip steps when you don't need to. Adding risk to the equation when it's just completely unnecessary is definitely foolish. And we were lucky in that situation. But yeah, moving forward past that whole incident, we ended up getting into the squeeze chimney, and there were no more safety issues, but it was our first time in a squeeze chimney, and it was memorable.
Do we have I think we could do like a couple takeaways just for any listeners,
Yeah.
Like what are like the biggest things to take home, and so I think one for me is like, find a really solid mentor or hire a guide, or both, preferably if you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really good point. And I think that is something that we were talking about when we were forming this podcast, is trying to bring more light towards guides. I think that personally in the beginning, I was like, guides, I don't need a guide. I'm a sender. I can climb whatever I want. But it's a wealth of information that I've looked into being a guide myself for some time. And not only is it extremely expensive, but there is a lot of information that they give on to you, or that they pass on to you. And so hire a guide. Half a day, go have them take out to the crag, or maybe it's your first multi-pitch and you don't have like a solid mentor. Hire a guide, fork out the cash, support these people who dedicate their lives to passing along this information. And they basically are mentors. They're just paid and they're professionals. So I definitely, super, super encourage people to hire a guide. If you ever feel like you're ready to push the grades, or you're ready to try a new alpine climb that's a little outside your limit, whenever you're trying something that's maybe 2 steps newer than what you're used to, hire a guide. Maybe, ask a guide some questions on Instagram. A lot of the people I've talked to are super open to just having discussions about climbing. So look for the knowledge, and if you can afford it, definitely pay for it and support these people.
Yeah. And also, like, coming up for most guides that I've ever dealt with, like, you can really cater specific things that you want to do to learn from them, and create a structure to that. You've paid this person. If you go out with more people, it's generally cheaper per person, or you can find really great instructive courses. But create a structure for yourself. Like, what do I want to get out of this experience? What are my needs and wants? And, like, even write down a list of questions. Make sure you hit all of those. Ask the guide. Like, that is going to be the absolute best person to ask all these things to. And I think one more note on that as well is, safety and these type of skills. I think the best analogy would be like CPR. You don't just train CPR once and then get certified for life. Like, you have to recertify CPR all the time, right? And I think safety things should be the same thing. Maybe you don't need to revisit how to tie in, every single year, but like other more important like skills, there are things that you should definitely be ticking off the box every single year. And if you and your friends, your partner, whatever, even just, dish out a little bit of cash, and you can get a really awesome, cool outing with a guide, like once a year, refresh all of your skills, learn new things, try off different harder objectives. It's a really amazing resource that I think more people should be tapping into for sure.
And with that, once you have learned those skills, obviously continuing to fold in those system checks into your, daily climbing is obviously, absolutely crucial. Make sure you're checking yourself. Make sure you're not getting too comfortable with one climbing style or another, and just really focus on those security checks and those system checks. And, no matter how many times you've done it, you got to do it every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, we talk about guides and looking for mentorship. I think that it's also important to, when you do have a certain base of knowledge, to turn around and be a mentor for somebody else. Share the knowledge that you receive. Maybe you have a group of friends that you climb with, 4 or 5 people. Maybe talk to your group and have a day where you go out and just revisit these things and be the leader, be the one who encourages this sort of safety focused behavior, be the reason, for the safety orientation, and pass along the information. We bring this back to the crag of somebody not behaving safely. Be the person who's educating people, be the person who's being professional and positive. And that goes with your group too. If you learn something, share that information. Just try to bring that positivity and share the knowledge as much as we can, because there's still a lot of knowledge about climbing that is just passed on from person to person. And I think that it is the most important form of passing along this information is peer-to-peer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Kyle. I think I'm pretty tapped out. I think that's a good place to stop, unless anybody else has some other points or anything they want to kind of toss in there.
No, I'm good on my end. Just thank you both for having me on the podcast. I think what you're doing here is really cool, and you're passing on a lot of really valuable information to people. And really representing a core group of climbers that are otherwise underserved in the current media that exists today. So thank you both for what you're doing. It's pretty cool, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Joree. It's been awesome to meet you, and you're officially our first guest ever. So I think that's a pretty awesome crown to put on your head there.
I'm psyched to hold the crown.
Yeah, awesome. It's awesome to have you on the podcast, Joree. Definitely probably have you again on the future.
For sure.
This concludes today's episode. If you have any questions or comments, both Max and I can be reached via email or social media. Our information is included in the links provided. Let's continue to have an open discussion, to share information, and provide support to our amazing climbing community. Remember to subscribe, like, and share this podcast with your friends. Thanks for listening. I'm Kyle Brocksterman, and this is the Climbing Majority Podcast.